Well, now from the other side of the aisle, let's bring in Virginia Democratic Senator and member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Tim Kaine. Senator, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Jackie.
Sir, the administration has said over and over that Maduro could have done this the easy way, but he chose the hard way. Listen to this.
Nicolas Maduro had multiple opportunities to avoid this. He was provided multiple very, very, very generous offers and chose instead to act like a wild man, chose instead to play around. And the result is what we saw tonight.
So when Senate comes back to Washington, you are forcing a vote that would block further military action without congressional approval. But is now really the time to handcuff the administration from taking any military action when there's a power vacuum that was created by Maduro's refusal to surrender?
Jackie, it's never the wrong time to enforce the Constitution. The Constitution says the United States shouldn't be at war without a vote of Congress. This president has waged military action against Iran, Nigeria, boats in open waters, and now Venezuela. And so, yes, I'm going to insist that my colleagues vote on whether we should be at war with Venezuela just on a presidential say-so. It was interesting. You asked my colleague, Senator Schmitt, should Congress affirm this action? And he chose not to answer your question because I think he knows what the law is. He referred to the administration's 40-page legal rationale. That's a legal rationale concerning strikes in international waters that specifically says it does not apply to provide a legal rationale for a strike against a sovereign nation like Venezuela. Maduro was a bad guy, but the U.S. shouldn't be at war in Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Mexico, Nigeria, or anywhere else if Congress doesn't have the guts to debate it and vote on it so that service members who are risking their lives, and there were 2 injuries here, know that they're doing that mission with the support of the nation's political leadership determining that the mission is in the national interest.
But to Senator Schmitt's point, how is this an act of war if the administration was, executing an arrest warrant? The government is functioning. There is a vice president that's just been sworn in, to his point. And, the U.S. military, Marco Rubio said there's no expectation that there will be any additional action, that, what the military did was in support of, exercising the arrest warrant and executing that.
Dropping bombs, authorizing covert operations, sending in the military, deposing the government, standing at a press conference and saying, we're now going to run Venezuela. And when asked, who does that mean, we're going to run Venezuela, the president pointed over his shoulder to the Secretary of Defense and the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of State. To say this isn't a military action that calls for a congressional response, and many of my colleagues want to avoid voting if at all possible. But to say this isn't a military action that requires congressional authorization, I think is to put your head in the sand.
Well, there is precedent for this,
and frankly,
though,
it follows up. There sure is. The United States has invaded many countries in Latin America for decades. And the doctrine that President Trump is now using, this Monroe Doctrine, was a doctrine that said the U.S. had the free rein to interfere militarily in the political affairs of nations in the Americas. And what did that get us, Jackie? It got us hostility in a region where we should be more connected with our neighbors. And it led many, many times to gross abuses of populations by dictators that the U.S. helped install. Our history is not a good one here. We should learn something from it.
Well, the parallel that's being drawn is George H.W. Bush deposing Manuel Noriega in Panama without a vote in Congress. The Wall Street Journal editorial board writes this: Mr. Maduro's damage goes well beyond the drug trade. His socialist and authoritarian policies burdened the region with millions of refugees. He flooded the U.S. with migrants in an effort to sow political discord. The dictator is also part of the axis of U.S. adversaries that includes Russia, China, Cuba, and Iran. All of this makes military action justified, despite cries from the left that it's illegal under international law. As for gripes that Mr. Trump is acting without congressional approval, the Constitution gives broad leeway to executive action on national security. Maduro is a really bad guy. Do you think that his victims actually care about a vote in Congress?
Well, he's a bad guy, but we pledge an oath to the Constitution, Jackie, and the Constitution does not give the president the power to initiate military action. The Constitution says we shouldn't be at war without a vote of Congress. And then once Congress weighs in, and all the arguments that you suggested, anyone in the Senate who wants to introduce a war authorization and make those arguments, let him make them. But it's strange that even colleagues like Senator Schmidt duck the question of whether Congress needs to act to affirm this. Let's have a debate on the floor of the Senate before the American people and let them decide whether it's a wise use of U.S. military, our sons and daughters in the military, to invade Venezuela, depose its president, and then stay and run it for a while, possibly looting it for oil reserves. I think what the American public wants is a president who focuses on the economy, bringing down energy prices, healthcare costs, food, building supplies, and who gets matters right at home. How can we run the Venezuelan economy when this administration is doing a poor job of running the American economy?
I think a lot of Republicans would dispute the notion that this was an invasion at all. But moreover, if Democrats cared so much about process, why didn't they do anything to bring Maduro to justice when they were in charge? I mean, the guy's been under indictment since 2020.
There have been sanctions placed against Venezuela, and I'll admit the sanctions have not been as effective as they might have been. And you know why, Jackie? Because many other nations wouldn't join us in the sanctions, even though they've joined us in sanctions against other nations. And why wouldn't they? They didn't like the President Trump, in his first term, threatening military action against Venezuela. And that caused them to back off support for sanctions. So sanctions and going into international forums and trade restrictions and embargoes and seizing vessels that are pursuant to sanction with a court order, these are things that can work. It's a lot better if you have your allies with us. What we've done now is push our allies away, and we've opened up.
I mean, I think the point I'm getting to, sir, the point I'm getting to is, don't you think that America's adversaries take note when all Democrats can muster is a joint statement or a press conference or some sanctions that are, loose, and take advantage of that? And that's why the administration feels
Jackie,
positioned to do this now?
If you think it's right for a president just on his own say-so, willy-nilly to wage war against anybody, I guess that's an opinion. But why haven't Republicans brought forth a military authorization? Why are they ducking votes
Would you vote for
on
that?
whether this is a wise strategy? I'd vote against it. I think another war, Virginia, which is a very pro-military state, and I'm the father of a Marine, Virginians are tired of endless wars, and we don't want to engage in military action that's unnecessary. What Virginians are asking for is, let's fix the economy, let's fix health care costs, let's work with our allies rather than shove our allies away from us. We need allies in a world to confront real adversaries like China. What we've done in this is send a message to China that it can invade Taiwan. We've sent a message to Russia that it's fine for Russia to invade Ukraine. The U.S. has stood up for the proposition that nations' sovereignty should be respected and should not be invaded, and we've just basically inspired a race to the bottom where we don't have the standing to enforce rules of law and international human rights.
Well, we will watch that debate continue to unfold when the Senate returns this week, tomorrow. Happy Sunday. Thank you for coming on the Sunday briefing, Senator Tim Kaine.
Absolutely, Jackie.
Appreciate your time. Always good to talk to you, sir.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.